Hi, I'm Eileen Roche, and welcome to today's episode of Between Friends. I'm so glad you've joined me today because today we're talking about probably my favorite topic, which is quilting with your embroidery machine. I've had a lot of fun piecing lately, and now it's time to load it on the embroidery machine. I actually already started quilting it, but I just want you to see the work that's in progress. And there's so many points that we have to cover, right? There's planning the quilting, there's making the quilt sandwich once we have the top pieced. There is loading the quilt onto the machine, planning out the method, where we're going to start and where we're going to end. And then also, there is, handling all that bulk, right, of the quilt because it's 60 by 72, so it's considered a lap quilt in the quilting world. But on an embroidery machine, that's a pretty big quilt, right? Because many times what we're quilting are table runners, tote bags, smaller things like that. Yeah, so let's see what your comments are. So Linda Brooks, she says lots of planning for sure. You're right. Appreciate that. Oh, look who's in the house. Joanne Banco, nice to have you here. Thanks for joining us today. And I see some comments about nice weather, sunny and 34 in Wisconsin after a snowstorm yesterday. Yeah, you've had some snow this winter. Not a whole lot, but I was up there recently and it was white. It was quite beautiful. And somebody's got 74 or 70 degrees somewhere. But anyway, it's beautiful here in Texas today, although it's a little cooler than we expected. Like, when I went outside, it was 48 degrees. That's considered chilly here. As compared to Wisconsin, where she's happy at 34, right? But we'll get up to 60 or more today. So I see many of you are here. And so I guess you like the topic of quilting with your embroidery machine. So in the comments, why don't you tell me if you have attempted to quilt with your embroidery machine? And if so, what size quilt have you started with? Was it a table runner? Was it something larger like a baby quilt? Or have you even gone all the way to like queen or king size? Because it's just so much fun to complete those quilts all by yourself. So let's see. And Dawn Tennyson says that she bought her first, I believe she means snap hoop, and haven't used it yet. Well, I hope that today's class, this episode of Between Friends, inspires you to get out that snap hoop and use it. And if you're really cautious, you're concerned about how to use it, you can see how I handle it today. But, go into your kitchen cabinet or, a linen closet and find an old terry cloth towel and just put a monogram on it, something that, already exists in the home, nothing that's precious to you, so you can just become familiar with hooping and stitching in a snap hoop monster. Because without the invention of snap hoop monster, none of us would be quilting full-size quilts on our embroidery machine. It is truly the revolution of that magnetic hoop that allows us to quilt with our embroidery machines, because we have the benefit of, quilting your first design and then just lifting that top frame, advancing the fabric and putting that top frame in place instead of taking the entire hooped quilt off of the machine for each hooping. We would not be finishing quilts in that manner in a standard hoop. So let's see. And Linda Brooks says she doesn't buy a machine without getting the snap hoops. I love that. I would second that. If there is not a snap hoop monster available for that machine, I'm not going to buy that machine for sure. So let's see. Laurie Albrecht, she says her largest project was a king size quilt, and she was glad to have the weightless quilter. Well, I'm glad to hear that comment. I too have tackled a king size quilt, and it's a lot of work. It's still a king size job, right? But with weightless quilter and snap hoop monster, you get it done. Let's see, Becky Mons, you're a frequent flyer here at Between Friends. Love seeing you here today. And you've only quilted a table runner. You enjoyed the process, but haven't had time to do another. Well, when you have time, maybe you'll get to another project. It is fun, and it's a great feeling of accomplishment. So Let's see what other oh, and Linda, you have used it for edge to edge. Could never have done it with a regular hoop. Right. I agree. Could you do it with a regular hoop? Yes, it is possible. What are the challenges? Well, one of the challenges is that the quilt will pop out of the inner and outer ring. That's a challenge and kind of frustrating. The other challenge is that you have to remove the hoop from the machine along with the quilt for every hooping. So yes, it's possible, but I'll tell you, the quilt that I'm going to show you today is about 50 some hoopings. Believe me, after I got to like hooping number 10 of having to remove a quilt from the machine, I don't think I would complete that. I would hunt down a long arm quilter to have her finish it. Okay, so let's see. And Janie, you want to know, can you quilt in a 6x10 monster? You most certainly can quilt in a 6x10 monster. You're just going to do more hoopings than somebody who has, let's say, a 9x14 hoop. It's definitely manageable. I did my first quilt, actually a quilt that I quilted in the hoop, and I did that with a 5x7 hoop. So, it's possible, right? Absolutely. Okay, so Jenny Owens, you're going to tackle a lap quilt. Well, that's the size 60x72 that I'm working on today. Let's see. All right, so let's see. Let's head over to PowerPoint so we can really get started. Here's we're going to talk about prepping, establishing the first hooping, connecting the design. So they're the big three that we're going to tackle. But in between that, we have some subtitles, most certainly, because you don't just go from prepping the quilt to figuring out where the first hooping is to connecting the design. So I'm going to really walk you through the process. And of course, today's program is brought to you by Weightless Quilter, which I invented several years ago. And to me, it's been an absolute game changer. So the Weightless Quilter is a floor frame. You can see it's sitting on the floor there, right underneath the table. And it has poles that stand up vertically from that floor frame. And they hold the quilt above the machine bed so that the fabric travels with the hoop. And I'm going to show you exactly what I mean, So let's go ahead and take a look at the quilt that we're going to quilt today. This is a sampler quilt that I've invested in the AccuQuilt cutting system, and I don't know if you're a fan, if you use it, but I love that cutting system. It has made me a better quilter. I can tell you that my rotary cutting skills leave a little to be desired, and it's not a process of quilting that I enjoy, working with a ruler and a rotary cutter. And I know many of you were probably wizards at that. Just not my bag, right? Once I found the AccuQuilt cutting system, I thought I died and went to heaven. It's just fabulous. So it makes me a better quilter. So I used, the fabric that I used is a Moda fabric, and it's Strawberry Lemonade, designed by Sherry and Chelsea. It's a mother-daughter team, I believe. And it came out last summer. It's called Strawberry Lemonade. So pretty. And the sampler blocks that you see here in the quilt, there's 30 blocks in all, and they're 12-inch blocks. Some of those blocks are designed from the cube system. And I'm not going to teach you all about AccuQuilt. They have tons of information on their website, but I'm just kind of giving you the basics. And then I also own some bobs. So a bob die is a block on board, and that means it's all the patches or all the pieces of a block on one die board. So you can go over to their website and find out more information about that. But so I did 15 pieced blocks, and then I knew I had this coming up, and I thought, well, this is a beautiful quilt to show on the Weightless Quilter. So I'm just going to do big whole fabric blocks. So that's why we have those 15, solid blocks, no piecing. It's okay. It's all right to cheat. It's okay to make it fast and easy. Okay, so let's start with making the quilt sandwich. Now, if you have seen some of our events, or I've done this on YouTube, I did it on Sewing with Nancy, but it's how to baste. your quilt sandwich in a confined space, and I use pool noodles. So let's go ahead over to the overhead cam and take a look at how we do it. So I have my pool noodle that I have cut, and I put a piece of painter's tape just to create a straight line. Notice I have some straight pins stuck right into the noodle. That's how I store them. And I have two identical, right? So one's for the quilt back and one's for the top. So let's go ahead and take the fabric for the backing first. And I'm placing the backing fabric wrong side up, and I will align the edge with that straight line. And I usually start in the center, and I kind of pull that backing straight, just make sure it's taut. I'm not stretching it. I'm just making sure it's nice and flat and straight. And, if any of my team members are watching that are here in the building, I hear the landscapers are right outside the window. So maybe if somebody could go outside and ask them not to blow right now, because I think that would distort the sound in here. Can't plan this stuff, folks. Just happens. Okay, so as you can see, wrong side up, and now I'm just going to roll it and remove any excess pins that you didn't use so that they're not in harm's way. And you just want to make sure your fabric is rolling nice and straight. And I'm keeping an eye on the edge of the fabric to make sure that it is going onto the pool noodle in a straight fashion. You can smooth the fabrics this way. And I have a whole width of fabric here, so you'll just kind of bear with me, and I'll make sure that we get that all wrapped on to the noodle. And there you have it. It's that fast. Now, how wide does your surface have to be? As you can see, you don't need that much depth, but it does have to be as wide as your quilt top. So if you have a quilt top that's 60 inches like mine is, not this sample, but the one on the Weightless Quilter, then I had it on my dining room table that's at least 60 inches wide, right? But it's a dining room table, so its depth is only about, I'm just going to guess 32 inches, let's say. Maybe it's 40. And then you just work in, once you get that rolled out, then you just work in small increments across the width of the table or the depth of the table. Okay, so this is my quilt top. Didn't I do some perfect piecing here? Okay, not really. I cheated. It's a cheater quilt. But it's a great example of, for today's project, because we're going to connect designs and hoop and all of that. Okay, so here's my pool noodle. Again, I have the painter's tape on it. I'm going to pull up that fabric, and I just want to align that edge. And I hope that I'm right. There we go. And I'm going to start in the center. And I know I do have my selvage on here, but that's okay. I should have cut that off. But this is not a real project, right? This is just a step out so you understand the concept. And I would suggest that you try to use pins. That these ball head pins are probably about as large as I would go on this project. Like those flower head pins that I had earlier, they're okay as long as you can get them down nice and flat, but they really do protrude. So I'll skip that and I'll go back to the ball head so that as we roll, on a big quilt, it would matter, right? If those pins are bulky, they would begin to skew the fabric. Okay, so again, now we're just going to roll, and we're just going to take our time and make sure we get that right. And smooth it as we go. Keep an eye on those edges. And what if it starts to twist and turn? Well, that probably means that you just unroll it and kind of start over. I can also keep an eye on seams here and make sure that as I roll, it is rolling in a straight line. Like if it wasn't straight, we wouldn't want this to happen. As you can see, we're not parallel with the seams on our quilt, right? So there's all kinds of guidelines that are visible on your fabric or your quilt top that you can use to make you a good quilter in preparing your quilt sandwich. Okay, so now we have that all lined up, right? Okay, so let me see. I'm going to see if there's any questions before we move on to the next part. Let's see. I've done edge-to-edge quilting on 5 large quilt on your Stellare. It's a big process, but satisfying. It is a big process. We have to acknowledge that quilting these full-size quilts, anything larger than a baby quilt, it's a big job. It really is a big job. And that's why, long arms were invented, right? And in the industrial world, they most certainly aren't quilting on embroidery machines. They're using the proper machinery. But we have embroidery machines and we like to stretch the limits. And here at Dime, we've created the tools for you to be successful with those embroidery machines. So, okay, so let's see if there's any other question before we get going. Okay, so let's go back. Now we're going to pin base. Now notice I have a cutting mat here. I placed it on top of my hooping mat, which is always here on the table, right? And now I'm going to take my quilt back fabric and roll that out. And actually, I usually do it the other way. So I'm going to spin it around this way so that I have the noodle away from me. And then I take my batting. And this can be a little awkward on the table, but let's say on your dining room table. But you'll get it down. You'll get it down. It's not that difficult. And you just take this batting and you line that up with the backing and just kind of make sure the area that you're going to pin baste, what you're concerned about here is that the backing fabric is flat on the surface and so is the batting. I don't even worry about this area back here, which frankly you can't even see, but like I have it kind of balled up just like that, right? And that's fine. It can live like that. Next up, we're going to take our quilt top and line that up with our backing. And, now I'm not centered, right? So I need to get centered. I need to pay attention to that. You most certainly can lift that batting. Make sure that your quilt top is inside the batting. I always cut my batting and backing wider than my quilt top to just allow some wiggle room. It's also helpful for hooping later on. I may need to extend off the edge a little bit with the hoop. So, I didn't add that much fabric for backing and batting for this sample, but I most certainly do on my full-size quilt. Okay, so then we just roll that back. Next up, we have pins. So before we get started on how to pin, I'm going to show you some options. Look at the different size of pins that are available, and these are just some of the sizes, right? I mean, we go from teeny, teeny, tiny, and I know that Joni Zier Poole, who helped me design the weightless quilter, she's a renowned free motion quilter, and just does beautiful work. She prefers this size pin. Can you believe that? That is so tiny. I prefer either this size or this size. This is too big. By putting this in your quilt, you have too much slack, too much sloppiness in the quilt itself. It just doesn't hold that well. So this is about where I go. The curved is very nice, but not mandatory. Okay, this tool, the quick clip, we don't make that, but it is available everywhere. So you just take a look for it. It is just a handy little tool, and I'm going to take it out and show you how to use it in a moment. But it has a gold post here that has some notches in it that allows you to close those pins really quickly. All right, so depending on your batting, you're going to place your pins, about a hand's width apart, right? You might want to be a little tighter than that at the edges, but not so much, not so much. And I find when I'm quilting with my embroidery machine that many times it's the magnetic hoop that is really holding that quilt sandwich together. Of course, we need these pins in the process of moving the quilt onto the machine and then, advancing it and so forth. We need to keep it all together. But truth be told, when it's time to actually quilt and you have your snap hoop monster in place, you're removing those pins that are either in the sewing field or around that hoop. So See, this just has these little tiny grooves right there. Can you see that? These little tiny grooves, and they just catch that the straight line of the pin. And you might think, oh, that's overkill, right? But you're doing a big quilt. It's a lot of pins. It might take me about a half an hour, 45 minutes to pin baste that sampler quilt that I showed you. And so that's a lot of pins. And if you're like me, you use your hands all the time. So you want to protect them as best you can. Okay, so we are going to just do a couple here, and then we're going to advance. I'm not going to make you watch me do all of the entire strip of fabric, this quilt sandwich, but I just want you to see, how I would do that. Okay, so now we'll close this one, and we'll close this one. And that's really enough. So, but as we work, that's all we do. We can lift this batting back, unroll the backing, place the batting in place, making sure everything is nice and smooth, unroll that quilt top, and pin baste again, right? It's as easy as that. It's as easy as that. So I would encourage you to use that if you have a limited space. I am never going to crawl on a floor again and pin baste a quilt. Okay, so let's see what our folks say. Jennifer Alexander, you use curved pins to quilt yours, and you definitely use the quilt clip every time. And you keep them in a container together. Yep, Sandra Martinez, you have that tool. You love it. Yeah. Oh, you don't have it. You got to get it. Well, you should get it because it is awesome. Yeah, and Star Raymond, you never knew about it? Yeah, you got to get one. They're not that expensive, and well, that store that we all used to shop at, Joann's, they used to carry it, but if they're anyway, you'll find it. Just Google it, you'll find it. Let's see. Jennifer Alexander says, quilting a large quilt on your embroidery machine is a repetitive process. The struggle is real, but quite doable. It is. And it's basically free, right? Because you already have the equipment, so you might as well use it. You're not paying someone to quilt your project. So that's another thing that people like to do for sure, or, avoid doing, right? So let's see. Sandy Hearth says, are the pool noodles used to make quilt sandwiches for pinning and basting? That's all they're doing. Absolutely. That is all they're doing. And it's quite handy. And it's just a real place saver. So I hope that you can, I hope that you use that technique. They are just awesome. Okay, so what's up next? What's up next is, let's go to PowerPoint and see. The next thing we're going to do is we made the quilt sandwich. So now we're going to plan the quilting. Well, if you are an Ashley Jones fan and you watched her software success on Tuesday, you'll know that she closed the show, or towards the end of the show, she showed my quilt and how to plan the quilting for that quilt. So here is Ashley Jones, and this is the end of her software success on Tuesday. So it's not real long, but I think you're really going to enjoy it. And here we go.
Okay, so let's do a plan with my quilt planner, and then we'll answer some questions, and we should be finishing up. Okay, so I'm going to do a new page here, and I'm going to create a quilt with my quilt planner. So my quilt planner is Dime's program that'll let you plan the quilting design layout. Okay, and so Eileen's quilt, I think she told me it was like 61 by 74. And then for the block size, I'm going to actually enter a rectangle for a hoop size, and I'm going to do 8 by 12, and it could fit in your 8 by 12 hoop, and then no sashing. And you can see it fills up the entire area with these blocks. Now for our quilting design, I'm going to use the same one everywhere. So I'm going to color all my blocks the same color. Same color means you're going to be using the same design everywhere. And I'm going to make the design darker so we can see it. And then I'm going to make the coloring lighter, 10%, so that it is easy to see the design. Then I'm going to say, okay. Okay. Now to get the design in our block here, I'm going to choose File and Merge. This is the same way that you would use a design from an outside source. And here's the design that Eileen sent me that she's using, that she created. And if I center it in one of these blocks here, you can see that it repeats automatically. Okay. And so I can see exactly what the entire quilt is going to look like. Now, if I zoom in, it's a little bit bigger than the block that we chose, which is fine as long as I've got a hoop that will work. And you can see here that it's lining up with my points almost perfectly there. And so each time she rehoops, she's going to line those up to get that all over quilting. Now, if you want to design on the image of your quilt, you can choose File and Load Backdrop. Eileen sent me a picture of her quilt, and so I can select that. And you can see it comes in really small. That's because we need to define the scale, okay? So if you choose the Define Scale option, and then I need to zoom in so I can see what I'm clicking here. So I'm going to go back, Define Scale. That's this fly out menu on the left, Define Scale. And then I'm just going to click from one point to the other point, and then 60 or 61. I can't remember what she said. So 60, I think it may have been 60 by 72. That's a more normal size. So, and that actually looks great. But that's an easy way to design right on top of your quilt to see what it's going to look like. And then if I slide this option here lighter, I can then see a little bit better. But you can see here, this is a really good representation of what it's going to look like when it's all quilted. So
what were we going to do next? Let's see. Next, we were going to talk about handling the quilt. So let's go ahead and let's just, I just want you to see the quilt right now because I think it's, let's get some cohesiveness. So now you can see that the weightless quilter is in place and my sampler quilt is on it, right? So I'm going to remove all my noodles from the overhead cam. But so right now it's not doing anything. And notice I have 4 poles, right? I have all 4 poles, but I only have it attached to the 3 poles. And that's because I'm up at the top of the quilt, very near the upper edge. So I drop the quilt from that 4th pole. It's only at this time in the quilt, when I'm up at the top portion, that I actually use this 4th pole. Normally, I'm sitting at the table and any section that's, hanging off here is just on my lap. But anyway, I just want you to see it kind of in action. So let's go ahead and just so you can keep your eye on the weightless quilter so that you can see how it moves with the pantograph, right? So as the hoop moves, it moves. Isn't that so cool? So the entire quilt's moving. You're not fighting the weight. Okay, so let's go to the overhead cam now. So you can take a look at the weightless quilter. Just the parts. Okay, so I have some miniaturized versions here. Some parts are miniaturized. Like these are the poles, the fabric poles. Notice how they come in 2 different dimensions. So we have a skinny one and then a thicker one. And the skinnier one is more flexible than the thicker one. So depending on the weight of your quilt, you would choose either one. And you get 4 skinny and 4 thick. So it's your choice. You're going to get 4 corner brackets. Now these sit on the floor and the floor bars slide into place. You don't need any hardware to attach this, the floor bars into the corner brackets. They just slide all the way in and stay in position. Then your poles go into those slots and the fabric poles, fabric clamps attach on top. And then the fabric is captured right there in the fabric clamp. Super simple. You don't need any tools. it goes together in just 2 minutes, really. Okay, so I'm just going to see if there's any questions. Let's see. I wanted to show you the overhead, and I wanted to show you how it moves. Okay, so let's reposition the quilt, right? I'm going to show you how we would do that. Okay, so now, okay, on the on this baby lock machine, we have the thread tray attached in the back. So, but it still allows me, I have the big 9.5 by 14 hoop, so I can still rest it on top. And then I'm going to advance my fabric. I have a template of my design already printed out, and I'm going to connect that design with the end of my previously stitched design. Now, I am walking in the back just to make sure that I'm flat in here. And then I want to make sure that I am parallel. My template line is parallel with my seam. I know you can't see that here, so I'm going to go to another machine and show you how that works. We'll get a little bit tighter. And in fact, I'm going to use my little quilt sandwich that I just made on the pool noodles so that you can see how that goes. Okay, here we go. Now, normally your pool noodles would be, they wouldn't be in place any longer because, you know, you would have finished the task. But if you remember, if you were here when I first started the live, and I didn't pin base the entire strip of fabric because this is just for demo. Now, I did notice that in the comments, someone said, well, what if you have a really big quilt and your pool noodles are not long enough? Well, one of our friends said that she uses pipe insulation. You can get that at Home Depot. You can also get that all year round. So for those of you who live up north and don't have pool noodles available all year round, at your big box home stores, you can get pipe insulation, and it comes in longer lengths. But if you're using pool noodles, simply butt the two ends together and take like masking tape or packing tape and just tape that together. That's all. You do want to make sure when you cut a pool noodle that you do it evenly. As you can see here, this is not perfectly straight, right? So when I put them together, now I kind of have an angled joint, right? It doesn't want to play nicely. But if I had done it properly, like maybe the other ends are flatter, then you can see it's nice and flat. Then you just tape those two ends together, and that's as easy it is, okay? All right, now we'll head over to the other machine. Let's take a look at what we're going to do here, though. So, just kind of clean this up. And here's my quilt top, right? And I'm going to stitch this cute little floppy design. It's like a little loop. And I did, even though I didn't share with you, but in my quilt planning, I realized that I can get 3 across. And probably what I would do, and I'll see I'm already removing a pin, right? Because I know that's going to be my first 2 pins. I planned in the center, right, of my quilt. And I'm going to start in the center column. And I'm going to, because this design connects top to bottom, see how it's going to connect in that fashion? I want to make sure that my quilt path is going to go north and south. So I'll start at the north, or I'll start in the center and go all the way down and then come all the way back up. I am not going to go from center to the right. I'll just do 1 long column, and then I'll advance, and then another long column, and I think 3. Well, I'm not really sure. So you find the center, and we're going to determine that this is our center. So here's my first design. Notice how I'm laying that template right on that seam. If you have a seam, use it. It's the best guideline that you could possibly have on a quilt. So use that guideline. Now, to make things a little bit easier, I'm going to give myself a little bit of space up there and start this quilting design so I have some room for hooping up here. So there you have it. That's going to be my first one. My next one is going to be right here. That's going to be the next one. But I'm not going to put this in place until I have already stitched this design. So let's go ahead over to the machine, and we're going to do that. And so you always want to make sure you have a bobbin in place, right? I know you can't hear me very well, probably. So I'm just going to get some thread and thread that machine. And let's see. Okay. All right, here we go. So we have our small design, and I'm in an 8.5, an 8x8 hoop. And so right now, what I want to do is I'm just kind of eyeballing that my needle is and foot is centered over that template. Now I know that my design is smaller than my hoop, so I'm going to have some wiggle room that I can use to position my design. But what I want to make sure is that I'm straight in the hoop. That's really key. Excuse me. And there's a couple of things we can do to do that. We can use the marks on the hoop that tell us that this seam is hitting the centering guide just a little bit left of the 0. And it is doing this almost the same thing at the top. So we can just kind of lift that a little bit and scooch our fabric over. There we go. And so I have my design on the screen. Another thing I can do is I can use part of my trace feature and just lower that presser foot and see that the foot is going to travel parallel with that vertical line on my template. And that is spot on. And look, folks, I was able to hoop that in this fashion, you know, kind of under this stress. I know you can do it at home for sure. Okay, so now I'm going to lift that template, lift the foot, and I always peel it back because it's sticky. That's our print stick target template paper, which we love. Okay, and we're just going to let that stitch. So let's see what kind of questions you have. So we can, most of the time, quilting on your machine is spent rehooping. Right. So maybe we'll just go over to the other machine. It is working. I'm not so sure you can hear me over there, but I'm this. Okay. All right. So what we're going to do is I just want to show you how we reposition the quilt. How about that? And I'm going to grasp that quilt in the back fold. And like I said earlier, that most of the time, that's where that quilt is attached, in the 2 back folds and this left one in the front. And I'm just going to kind of slide it around so you can see just how beautifully, like when the machine is stitching, that's what your quilt is doing. It's like having someone in your sewing studio holding the quilt while you do the work. It's awesome. It just lifts all that fold. Now, I would be sitting here and I would probably have this in my lap. And if I was working around my studio and didn't want to be sitting there, well, I most certainly could use this front pole, all 4. But often when I'm home, I leave my weightless quilter floor frame in place around my machine. I just have the bottom bar in the back and on the side and the back, and I don't use this one that's in the foreground. So let's go to PowerPoint so you can take a look at how you would actually set that up in your studio on the floor. So let's see. Okay. So this is set up exactly as I'm showing you now. So as you can see, we have a small sewing cabinet or sewing table that the floor bar surrounds the table. So I have one in the back and I have the one on the left. And that's sufficient to hold the quilt in place. Now, if you have a different setup, and you have a wide table, then you most certainly can put the floor bar underneath the table. What you want to make sure is that the weightless quilter is surrounding the hoop and not the table, or not just centering it around the table. Notice how your hoop is not dead center in the table, right? It's over to the left a bit. So that's where you want to center your weightless quilter, because that's the area that it's actually holding. So here's a cabinet that's flush with the floor. Some of you have cabinetry that goes right to the floor and you can't, get anything underneath of it. So in that case, you would just surround your cabinet with those floor bars. And remember, those poles stick up and they kind of slant away. So that works out great. Okay. Now, if you have cabinetry that's on casters, the floor bar section is only 3/4 of an inch in height. So that's the only amount of clearance you need from the bottom of the cabinet to the floor, so that you can slide that floor bar underneath your cabinet, like probably next to your casters. And then your corner brackets would be behind your cabinet or in front and hold the poles. So that's how that works. Now, this image here shows a sit down. Well, this is actually showing a multi-needle machine. See all those spools? So that's illustrating how you would set it up if you were on a multi-needle machine. But this setup is also identical to a sit down long arm. So that's one of those, like Handy Quilter makes the Capri, I think. And, lots of the machine companies, they make a sit down that you sit at the head. You're perpendicular to the machine, not parallel. So that's how you would set up your floor bars. They would not be connected behind the machine. The bars just kind of overlap, because your table, everything is different. Size of quilt is different. Now, that's how you would position it when you're working in the middle of the quilt. But sometimes when you're working, like, let's take a look at that image. If you're working on the right edge of the quilt, you would drop the quilt from the floor, from the fabric clamps on the right side. And, the body of the quilt would only be held on the left side. So that's really how that works. And it's very versatile. It's just so versatile for lots of different machines. And let's see, Sandra Cummings, you asked, what kind of space is needed behind the machine? Well, the space that in my setup right over there today, let's go ahead and put that over there, the actual machine, the sampler quilt. There's only about 18 inches between the back of my table and the wall. And at home, I have had it right up to the wall, and the fabric poles and clamps, they just sway right to left and they hold the quilt, and they don't go back, forward, but they don't go backwards. They will come forward, but they just go right and left. But again, it's holding that weight up for sure. And you don't, let me go back over there. So depending on where you are in the quilt, like, okay, I'm going to drop this corner, right? We'll drop that. And then if I'm down in this area of the quilt, then I probably don't want to hold the four corners, right, or the back corners. I want to grab another portion of the quilt and, let it hold the quilt in the fabric clamps in that manner. So I'll release this and then just grab it, a block or two down. And now they're free to dance. And if you could see where I am over there, they're very vertical in the back wall right now. They're standing straight up because, there's not that much, the fabric is pulling it towards the hoop, which is exactly what you want. That's perfectly fine. Now, you may find sometimes that it's too taut. Like if you were to do something in this fashion, this is really tight. This is probably a little too tight. I mean, right now it's okay, but you'll find maybe
depending on the weight of the quilt and all of that, you could have some lift on the floor from the floor bar, and that's just because there's too much strain in that area. So just relax it a little bit. Just let that go and drop a little bit of the quilt. And you're going to do this, well, I don't know, maybe every 4 hoopings, depending on how big of a hoop you're using. But, you have to reposition the quilt, the hoop anyway. And so you often, as you do that, and you start the design, you look at the quilt and see if there's any strain, and you just readjust the quilt in the fabric clamp. It's fun. It's so much better than, struggling with it for sure. Okay, let's see. Creative Appliques, our friend Dawn Chase, she says that Dollar Tree is selling pool noodles all year round here in Virginia. People use pool noodles for a lot of different things, and a lot of it doesn't have anything to do with a pool. So it's good to know that they're available in Virginia even all year round for sure. Let's see. Could you use a dial rod in the middle of the pool noodle and tape edges to give strength? I don't know what a dial rod is. Oh, a dowel? Maybe you mean a dowel? You could, for sure. You could use a dowel. Now, I have heard of people who use wood instead of the pool noodles. And, there's wood pieces that are called, I actually think they're called batting strips, batting, to be honest with you. And they're skinny. They're flat, very flat, and they're about 1.5 inches wide. And people use them instead of pool noodles. So that's fine. But yeah, you most certainly could use a dowel. Now, I store my weightless quilter poles inside my pool noodles. And I store all that in a tall wicker basket in a corner in my studio. And so I just put those weightless quilter poles inside the pool noodles, and that does help them stay rigid, straight, because you know how they all want to bend, right, over time. Okay, so let's see. And Leah wants to know, did you print 2 templates together in PEP? I most certainly did. So any design in any of our software, Embroidery Tool Shed, on up to Perfect Embroidery Pro, you can print a template. And you can select what size paper. And if your design is bigger, then definitely it will split the design for you onto that paper. So, and Sandy heard that paper that I'm using is Print and Stick Target Template Paper. It's a big, long title for a great product. So it's translucent, it's adhesive, and it's reusable. So it's just beautiful, and you can print on it. Now it'll print on inkjet and laser printers. You have to select the settings on your printer, right? You have to select high quality photo for the printout so that the ink doesn't smear. We've learned that. Mm-hmm. So let's see. I think one of our team members here has said, they've given you the link. And let's see, Linda Brooks, you said, you wish you had a mountain of it. The paper is awesome. You can reuse it again and again and again and again. You can. So on that 60 by 72 inch quilt, I have one template, and it will do the entire quilt. And you could also spray the back with temporary spray adhesive if you want to use it again and again and again and again. One good suggestion is when you are placing the template, like you'll notice I just throw it onto the quilt while the embroidery machine is stitching, right? So I just leave it in an area outside of the sewing field. But make sure you don't put it on the batting. There's always excess batting, right? You can. I mean, it'll be fine, but you get a lot more lint on it, and that does decrease the life of it. So for sure. Let's see. Okay. Yeah. Let's see. Yes, it's difficult or impossible to put anything larger than 12 by 12 wall hanging without the weightless scroll. The magnets of the hoops or anything of any size due to the drag. That's true, Linda. And but those magnets are designed to be to hold a quilt or a quilt sandwich, as long as the user, the embroiderer, is handling the bulk of the quilt. if those magnets were a lot stronger, we wouldn't be able to separate them. And that's a real problem for someone like me with my hands, and maybe all of you. We're hand people. We use them all the time. And also, we want to be able to release that top frame from our quilt sandwich after the quilt design has stitched, and then advance the fabric and put that back down. You wouldn't be able to do that if it was, twice, 3 times as strong. So our job as an embroiderer who wants to quilt with her embroidery machine is to make sure we handle the bulk of the quilt. That's what you have to do. So, and then it's very successful. Let's see. Okay, Remo Coxon over at Embroidery Garden says she loves the extra arms the weightless quilter gives you. Definitely. It is like having a friend in your sewing room. Okay, so let's see. Any more questions that we really have to get to? Okay, so I think that we do have some fun stuff coming up that I want to share with you. And let's see. So crazy today. I don't know how that got in there. Okay. Ashley is going to be here on April 1st with Software Success, and she's going to do a fantastic job, as you well know, right? She's going to follow up my presentation that I'll do the week before, which will be the On the House project, and she's going to kind of leapfrog or whatever you say, continue in that path. So we're having a lot of fun coordinating these lives together. Boy, do I wish she was here today, but she's not. I'm going to be back next week, and we're going to be talking all about tote bags, and I'll have my guest Sue Brown, because it will be the project of the month on the house. So I look forward to sharing that with you next week. And let's see. We do love it when you subscribe to our YouTube channel and like us on Facebook. It tells us you enjoy the content that we are giving you. And I don't know if today will be at the top of your list, but it'll be quite memorable for me. I can tell you that. Okay, let's see. We found some of your projects, and we encourage you to please share your projects on social media using the hashtags DimeSewAlong, On the House, or Exquisite Thread. And then we'll put them in this video. Okay, so this week's free design for On the House you can find on our website. Just go to embroidery, dzgns.com, the embroidery tab, and you'll find the free design link right there. And this is the last of the tile series. Well, next week we might have another one, but of the simple design. So this is a 4x4 design. It's actually 3.75, I believe. And it's just really cute, tiny little mosaic tiles. So hopefully you'll enjoy them. And I look forward to being back here with you next week when we have the sound working, the needle threaded, the bobbin in place, and everything we promised to show you will just go as promised. So thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure.